Good evening, viewers, and welcome to the Art with World. I am your host, ARSHAD WAHEED. Today, our guest is Dr. NASIR GONDAL, who is a doctor by profession, but he is also a very fascinating poet and brilliant translator. He is in the process of completing his translation of Walt Whitman's poetry, and currently he is based in New York, and is also elected Secretary General of Halka-e-Adab, New York. Thank you for coming to our show, Nasir Saab. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
And our other guest is TARIQ Bhatti. TARIQ Bhatti is a translator and Punjabi poet, and he is also deep insight in Punjabi literature and English literature. We have specially requested to join us this program and be part of our discussion on Walt Whitman's Punjabi poetry done by Dr. NASIR GONDAL. Welcome to our show.
Thank
Tariq.
you, sir.
How are you?
I'm grateful for the honor.
Okay, Dr. Nasir, starting with you, we understand that I have seen your poetry when both of us were young, and then later on you moved to Rawalpindi and established an organization which was Proud Pakistani, and you did many other things to promote Pakistani culture and its image. Later, like many other doctors and Pakistanis who moved to USA for higher education and then doing different jobs over there, you are a successful doctor over there as an oncologist. I just wanted to understand, how did you balance all these activities, your activism, your poetry, your translation, and your work? And then, of course, later we'll discuss with you your translation as well, and the work of Halka-e-Adab regarding promotion of Pakistani literature and art, and many other related things. So I would just start from here. Please tell us about your interest in literature and how in different phases of your life you have kept a balance between your work and your passion.
Thank you, Arshad. Poetry, how to balance poetry and life, and you said how it started. As a young student in high school, I had my first attempts at poetry. I remember my first public declaration of poetry was in the farewell in my high school in Hassan Abdal on the farewell of the 12th class. And then when we came to Nishtar, I joined the circle Halka-e-Adab, and there is where I met you, and we had some initial experiences in poetry. And then when I finished the studies, went to America, and somehow when you have to deal with life and your profession, it all went into like the background. And I would say a gap of maybe 20 years or so that I started attending Halka-e-Adab in New York. And there some interest spiked, but I really did not write poetry until just, I would say, 6-7 years back. And so as a poet, I'm really a recent poet because I had some poetry as a student and then I stopped. So what I was saying,
Yes.
that as a poet, I really have restarted writing in the last 6-7 years. And that all just started as one day we were attending the Halka-e-Adab, and there was one program to be held about Pablo Neruda, and they asked me whether I can write something, and I thought I'll just translate one of his poems. So that's how I started my journey back into poetry through the translation. And regarding how to balance, I think you always have to create a time when you are interested in something, and when you do that, you are able to find some time.
We'll talk about Halka-e-Adab as well in later part of our program. But at this moment, I would like to talk about your translation, and that is Walt Whitman, who is such a great poet, and he is referred to one of the most important poets of America. And this is a tremendous work you are doing. It's into translating him into Punjabi language. So Dr. Tariq Bhatti Sahib is also with us, and he has also read your poetry very carefully, and he has all questions. He would discuss it with you. But maybe if I can start it with the question that why did you choose Walt Whitman to translate? Because it's a great work, and it requires a lot of dedication, skill, command and languages, and it's a very challenging work. He's a great poet, and it's a great contribution to Punjabi literature as well while you are translating that. But maybe if you can just start, why did you chose Walt Whitman to translate?
I don't know that how much of a contribution that would be to Punjabi literature. No, but just to answer the question, something started before that, and that is my interest in Punjabi language as as art and literature. And I was introduced to Sangat of Najm Hussain Sayyid Sahib. They had started doing it online after COVID, and a few years back there was an opportunity to join it. So since then I joined this Sangat, which is twice a week. And that is like an introduction to Punjabi poetry, especially the classic poetry of the old poets from Baba Farid to Ghulam Farid. And during the discussion on poetry, Walt Whitman's name came up by one of the attendees, in fact, from India. And they talked about the poetry of Walt Whitman, that how in so many ways it resembles, it resonates with the themes which we have in our own classic poetry. So in fact, that's where I got this interest to read a bit about Walt Whitman, and that's how it started. And then I thought just to give it a try because I wanted to try to write something in Punjabi. I had been writing some poetry in Urdu, and that's how it started. And I don't think that it may fit all the criteria of a good Punjabi poetry, and I think I'm learning at the same time. It has been 2-3 years because I have not been able to do the way I have been able to do it. And Leaves of Grass as a long poem, Song of Myself, which is 52 sections, like one section you can say for each week of the year. And I am up to like 32nd section in 3 years or so. So it's like a process. I try to use my own words to express. I would not say it's exactly a translation, because it is like, you can say, my own words inspired by Walt Whitman. I try to have one line expressed in my own way in Punjabi and move on to another line. So in that way, it is a kind of it's following that a poetry, but it's still my own word, is not like exact translation of that.
Well, I can very well understand, because it's very difficult to translate poetry, and somehow the element of transcreation also comes in. But Tariq has read your poetry very carefully, and he would tell us how did he find it. I mean, he just he compared your poetry with the exact text as well of Walt Whitman as well. So I have some questions, but I would like Tariq Bhatti to intervene and discuss your translation with you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, I did read the poetry of Walt Whitman while I was reading the Punjabi version rendered by Dr. NASIR GONDAL sahab. What I felt, Walt Whitman as a poet is very non-traditional, and since he is regarded the founder and one of the towering poets who introduced free verse in English poetry, particularly in American context. So there is no fixed length of lines and no rhyme and no meter. And it is very difficult from a Punjabi poetic perspective to create poetry from a free verse, a line which does not necessarily end within the same length of letters and words. So what I was feeling, Dr. Sahab has used each line and has created 4 Punjabi lines, and he has tried to create alliteration and Radif Kafiya, and he has tried to end the line with the same word like Khayal and Shal and Dhamal, which is missing in the actual poetry. So I think he has done quite a lot of hard work to retain the original essence of the poet, but also maintain the requirements of the Punjabi poetry. So this is where he is justified, and he is rightly saying that it is not per se the literal translation, but he has kind of grasped the basic idea, and he has very hard-workingly put Punjabi, cloth to the concept of Walt Whitman. So this is what I think I was thinking we should ask from him, how painful it might have been for him to add poetry from the classical Punjabi point of view, because we are very much rhythmic, musical, and we compose poetry on a given tal and matra and a music composition, etc. Whereas a free verse is a totally expanded expression of your creative, creative genius or whatever. So I think, Dr. Nasir Sahab, if you can respond, how did you basically bridge the gap of a poetic tools which were missing from Punjabi point of view?
Thank you, Bhatti Sahab. What I try to do is that I read a line, I try to understand it, what it means, and then I try to use my own words to express that thought. And sometime, as you said, that sometime one line is expressed in Punjabi in 4 lines, and sometime I've seen it is like a short poem in itself, each line. And once in a while I've combined 2 lines in 1 line, the other way around. But the idea is to think of the main idea and then try to use your own words. And yes, sometimes it's going back and forth, but it happened that in most of the sections, if not the whole section, parts of it, I could think that I can have like the same, as you said, kafiya, radif, or same rhythm or same similar sounding words I can use to have that semblance of Punjabi poetry with rhythm in it. And so it takes, yes, it is going back and forth. And on top of that, now, when reading those sections again, when ARSHAD had asked me for this program, I realized that it's 2-3 years old, the beginning part of it. And some of things I may want to change it. So it's like a process of my own learning, my own a bit deeper understanding of Punjabi language as a poet. And and in fact, that's interesting that Walt Whitman himself kept on revising his poetry for almost 40 years. So the Leaves of Grass was published multiple times with different editions, and he kept on changing it. And I just realized that I have to really keep on changing my own translation of his, because each time I read, I think that I have to make some adjustment and changes.
Okay, Nasir, this is a very interesting point you have just referred. that Walt Whitman himself had been revising it all the time. Even, I mean, his last edition was just before a few months he died. So maybe it's also a statement, this poem, as far as its content was concerned, it was challenging the existing norms. It brought in new ideas, new treatment. Its technique was new. And the same is that the fact that he kept on revising it. So it's quite close to the main theme of this poem, which is freedom, liberty, and deviation from established norms. So almost he challenged everything in technique, content, and his own practice of writing poetry. So I would like to hear from you, what did you find the main themes of this poem? And maybe you could explain what this poem is all about and why it is so important. And maybe we can, after that, I would also like to ask you, how did you find it closer to our Punjabi classic poets, which was the main reason for you to read this poem and translate it?
This is different than a classic poetry style. It's free verse, and as rightfully said, that he's considered like the founder of free verse. And some say that it is like it has a kind of the same style as the Old Testament or the Bible style. But it was that he wanted to be free from all the, you can say, constraints and shackles of a classical poetry tradition, and he can express what he wants to express. And I think there was a journey of finding his own self. That's how I read it, that he thinks aloud in his poetry, and he declares right from the beginning that this is his own song, and he will sing his own song, and he would not let anything come in the way. And that's a song, poetry of discovery of himself, of the nature around him, and the connection which he makes. And that is what really fascinated me, that like we have grown up with a tradition that as humans we are all one and we all have the same father and mother. But this poetry of his takes you a lot, many steps behind that. Not only that human race is one race, all life has one beginning, and even the inanimate objects of life, you are a part of everything. So leaves of grass, it also means that when you die, you have gone to the ground, and it comes up like, in fact, we heard it from Ghalib the first time. Sab kahan, sab lala o gul mein namaiyan ho gayi. Khak mein kya sochte hongi, pinha ho gayi. In fact, this kind of a concept, he has it, and beyond that we are all part of one thing, and you never die, and you keep on remaining a part, you remain a part of the universe at large. So that gives you a lot of strength, and that you are a part of nature. And then he experiments with all the traditions, and he, in a way, goes beyond that. And that is where I thought that there is quite a resonance of finding your own inner self. Although he's not speaking the language of faith or of belief, it is very materialistic in that sense, but it appeals to your inner sense, and it brings the good out of you. That's how I read it.
I was just wondering, while you were talking, how do you, have you ever done any translation of Punjabi classic or contemporary poets into English? And if not, are you planning to undertake few selected great poems from Punjabi into English so that, you know, Punjabi can benefit from your expertise in this way also? And in addition to that, I was also thinking that how do you see Walt Whitman? He has not only democratized the language, but apparently he has also democratized the aesthetics. For instance, when you compare him with Wordsworth, Wordsworth died around 50 years before him. He died in 1850, whereas Walt Whitman died in 1892. So it's around 50 years of difference. Wordsworth, from a different place of English landscape, was writing the poetry about nature, but his choice of language was quite aristocratic, and his aesthetics was more refined and of higher and sublime. Whereas Walt Whitman speaks of very ordinary things. He tries to celebrate ordinariness of life, as it is obvious from the title, Leaves of Grass. How would you comment between this aristocratic Jamaliyat and proletariat Jamaliyat?
I cannot answer a question of a comparison with other poets of English language, because I don't consider myself a good enough reader to have that comparison. But yes, Walt Whitman's writing poetry appeals your heart, that it's just as if a common man is talking to you in a common language. But when you hear him, it has a deep thoughts. And that is what, as you said, the democratization of a language and the thought. And the only other poet that I had tried to translate was, in fact, Langston Hughes. I tried to translate 13, 14 poems of him in Urdu at that time. I was more interested in Urdu. Regarding what you said, translating any Punjabi poetry into English, so that's where you see that what do you think is your relative strength and what's your handicap. Writing a poetry in English, I have never attempted to write, because I would not know that what I'm writing, how is that. So if I write like a poem or some piece of poetry in Urdu, I can be a judge of myself, that okay, is it good enough or not. I cannot say when I write something in English, because that tradition is completely foreign to me as a poet to write the poetry. So I don't think that I would attempt to do that. That's how I would answer that question, because I don't think
it is very it's very profound and very genuine of you, and I totally understand. You know, translating poetry from your mother tongue to a different language and vice versa, they both are very, very challenging, and you know, it is very, very uphill task. So over to you, Dr.
Yeah, Walt Whitman, his poetry, I mean, I've read some comments on that, and main comment is that it's about nature without check and with its full energy. So I would like you to comment on that, his poetry with this perspective. And I would also like to repeat my older question, that where did you find similarities between our classic poets and in Whitman? I can understand a bit, but I would like to hear more from you.
So, to answer the first question, again, in the sense that Walt Whitman's poetry is a language of his own time, which is like more than 100 years from now. But it is a language which I think anybody who knows English at that time would understand it. So it's not that you have to be a refined gentleman of a man of words, of letters to understand it. And it appeals to common themes. Then he explores the world around him. He looks at the ground, he looks at grass, he looks at people around him and the stories behind them. And it can be a common man, a white man, a black man, a Native American person, a child, a boy, an inanimate object. He talks about the feathers, the seasons. So he talks about what you see, what's around you. So it's not the esoteric ideas of high up in the sky and you're talking about those things philosophically. So that is what I think makes a connection with the classical Punjabi poetry as I read it or as I understand it, that they are also talking about a common man's concerns, thoughts, and finding a deeper meaning through that.
How was your experience of translating this poem?
I would say enjoyable. It's an experience in itself. I read a line, I try to understand it, and then I try to put it in my own Punjabi perspective. Sometimes I have to find words to express the thoughts. So it helps me go into my own journey of Punjabi language and try to find expression of that. And as I said before, I don't know how it will qualify as it's a place in poetry, but it has definitely helped me understand my own self and my own understanding of the language. So it's have been a very liberating experience for me.
Well, great. Art is generally a liberating experience. You referred to Sangat, and that was the main discussion and conversation in Sangat which inspired you to read and translate that. So I would like to explain it for my viewers that Sangat is a group of Punjabi writers and poets, writers, and all those people who like literature. It's in Lahore. It has been, I think, 3 or 4 decades. They have been holding their meetings regularly. They read different Punjabi poets, classic poets, and they discuss that and sing them together. In COVID times, the physical meetings were, of course, they were not possible to be held. So then it went online, and now in some way it has expanded its range as well. Now different people from different countries can join this group and participate in its discussions. Dr. Nasir, I also joined it through Zoom sometime, but I have found you almost regular, like anything, as if you have to go to your work and you always listen to that. I would like you to tell your thoughts about Sangat, its work, and how it's contributing in enriching Punjabi language at this time.
To me, Sangat and Najam Hussain Sayyid name are like synonymous. How it started years back and how it ended up the way as it is, I don't have that historical perspective as much as others may have. But literally it is around him. We have 2 meetings. one on Friday and one on Saturday. And yes, I had to really change my working schedule, because for me it's a Friday and Sunday morning that I have to make myself available for this Sangat. It goes over 3 to 4 hours. And on Fridays, they talk about, you take one item, one piece of poetry of one classical poet, like these days we are reading Shah Hussain. So there's one poem, a kafi, everybody reads reads it aloud, and then we go over difficult words, and then everybody talks. And what I enjoy or like is that the democratization, the democracy of a discussion there. There is no lecture, no one is like forcing their view on others, and everybody has their own view, and some are beginners like me, and some are there for a long time. Some have a lot deeper understanding of a language and a poetry than others. So it's an experience when you go through all that. And as you said, in the end, we sing. And on Sunday, there's mostly, it's a poetry of Najm Hussain Sayyid. I think he's one of the most under-recognized Punjabi poet and a contributor to the Punjabi language in this day and age. And so it has been I would say, a lifesaver for me. I was introduced to that by someone here in Halka-e-Adab. She was a student of Najm Hussain Sayyid, and she said, why don't you join that? Baji Nusrat. And since then I joined, and I'm hooked up on that. So.
Gondal Sahab, no doubt you have rightly appreciated and highlighted the contribution of Najm Hussain Sayyid and the Sangat, which is almost 50 years now, who have been teaching classical Punjabi poetry. I was just wondering, since we hear a lot nowadays about the AI, and particularly the translation which is done through using this artificial technology and intelligence, how do you see in the years to come, maybe my question has two parts, whether human would be required to create poetry while we could get it from the AI, and how the process of translation would be impacted. Do you think it will help positively, or it would make the process of translation more artificial? What is your take on this aspect of technological development?
AI is interesting and fascinating, and how AI has been used in translation of poetry. If you see over the last year or so in social media, you see a lot of experimentation, and initially people were making jokes and funs about how a verse of Ghalib or some other poet has been translated by AI, and people thought it's good for nothing. But I think over a period of time it's changing. So AI is just learns on itself. So I think that as far as translation is concerned, and even a poetic translation of from one language to another, it will improve. But I think because of the main emphasis is on English, so during our lifetime, if I may hazard a guess, that the translations of other languages work into English through AI would definitely improve. But how translations in other languages from English or from another language, that will depend how much material is out there which AI can use as a resource and learn from itself. So I think one should not underestimate the power of artificial intelligence, and it may do wonders in the future. But as far as in our lifetime, I think translation of something into Punjabi through AI may take a very long time.
There are two schools of thought. while translating. One is of the opinion that it is primary responsibility of the translator to remain committed and true and honest with the original text. And the other school of thought sports and says that probably translator has the room to play around while sticking honest with the basic idea and not being dictated and driven by the literal and word-to-word translation. What you as a translator, which school of thought you would subscribe to and why?
So I would not debate the definition of translation. So I would agree that translation should be true because you are trying to introduce that piece of work to another language. So translation should be as true to the original context, original in both in form and in a letter. But I don't think that I am a person who can do that. So I take a leave from it right from the beginning, and I realize that I cannot be a true translator. So that's why I always have to say that and declare that it's not really a translation. It's my own rendition of what the original thought is in its own language, because I don't find myself capable of being true to a letter and translating it exactly the way it is. For example, I may use local references which may not be there in the English language. Sometimes I would like use Mahiwal or Molajat or something I have used, so that would not be the translation. So that's why I don't think that I can do true justice to a translation the way it should be.
Well, Nasir, let's just go back to another topic, which is Halka-e-Adab, New York, and you are its Secretary General. Would you like to just tell us what are the main activities and what are the themes which most of our writers living abroad, which are reflected in their work, in their poetry, in their fiction, and essays and all that?
So just a bit of historical background. Halka-e-Adab in New York was started by Johar Mir. He was a journalist from Peshawar who had left Pakistan during some trying times, and he's since deceased, but he's the one who initially started along the lines of Halka-e-Adab in Pakistan, you can say. And over the years, it has gone through different transformations, or you can say metamorphosis, but the basic theme is the same, that it is an organization which holds its meeting twice a month, and each ijlas of Halka has its two parts. One is prose and one is poetry, and original work is presented as a short story or a sketch, a haka, or anything in prose. And then it's critically reviewed by people present in the meeting. And then there is a piece of poetry which is presented, and then it also goes through a critical review. And then in the end, which is a bit of a deviation from the original style of Halka-e-Adab, all the poets who are there, they share some of their recent poetry. So that is the form of it. The main themes is that, yes, people are living here, they have their own stories. So it is a platform which tells you stories mostly, I would say, about the people living in the West. I mean, our own, like Desi, or other people of color, or mainstream American life as experienced by or as seen by a writer in Urdu. And so it has its own theme. Themes. Poetry is, it can be all over the place. It can be a classic ghazal with classical topics, and it can be anything very different from that. What we have been trying to do is that, and it's done for the last 10 years or so, that at the end of the year we do publish a collection of all the work presented there. So we are creating archives, we are creating history. How much it will contribute to the future of the language here, we don't know, but at least we are doing our part here.
Nasir, I've seen you while you were in Pakistan. You just graduated. You made an organization, Proud Pakistanis, and you conducted different activities. And I think you also a member of APNA, which is an organization of Pakistani physicians working in North America. And you are also participating in Halka-e-Adab, which mainly reflects Pakistani diaspora's writings. And you are also connected with Sangat here through Zoom, and you are well aware of what's happening in Punjabi literature now. It is a very interesting trajectory. While you were here, you contributed, and when you are abroad, you are contributing in different ways in Pakistani literature and all that. I have a very different question now. What's the immigrant experience? Maybe you can share your experience or experience of other people around you in terms of relating to a different society, identity, or anything you would like to share with us.
So just to respond to how you started, that how I started from one end and where I am now, I think that sometime you have a desire to do something. I'm not saying in a very altruistic way. It is that you want to do something to contribute in one way or another. And I think that was probably the reason of being a bit active in student life, in student politics, because that was the only valid way of expressing yourself and trying to find your own way and trying to do good around you. And that was also, I think, the background of being a part of an organization which can do something for the betterment of the society. I'm using some cliche words, but I don't have any other words to express. But it was a kind of self-expression. So when life takes you to another country in search of your own livelihood, basically you're there to find a better life for yourself and your family. And then whatever, who you are still the same person. And when you get a bit settled, then you're able to look around and see that now what else you can do while you have done your own uphill journey of your own life in your own profession. You do try to find things to do to feel yourself satisfied that you're doing something to improve yourself and the society around you. And the immigrant experience is a tough one. It has its own challenges. My own experience, I can say that I was not double-minded when I left Pakistan, that I avoided, I would say, being in this dilemma that I have to keep on staying there, coming back, or have your one like in one continent. And so I had this thing that once you leave, you have to find your own life there, and you have to find new avenues while remaining connected to who you are. And I think that immigrant experience has now a sea change, because it's a different America than it was when I came here. There's a lot of your own immigrant community around. And living in New York, or the surrounding area, I never thought that I am that much away from Pakistan. So,
Well, Nasir, it was very interesting talking to you, and I had to ask you many other questions, particularly on your blog, Gharib Khana, where you publish your articles, and some of the articles were really fascinating. I enjoyed reading your commentary on Unbearable Lightness of Being. I think that was the best commentary I ever read in that novel. And of course, your translation of Garcia Marquez's short stories. But our time is up, so maybe some other time. And thank you very much for sparing time for us. I understand there are a lot of difference of time. It's night in New York, but you are still with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab.
thank you very much for having me, and thank you for Bhatti Saab. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tariq, for sparing time again and contributing in our
indeed
discussion.
honored, and it is privilege.
So viewers, thank you for watching us. See you next Sunday, same time.